Welcome to the deep dive. So we live in this world, right? Just overflowing with information constantly. How do you actually cut through all that noise? How do you become truly, genuinely well-informed? Finding those real aha moments and figuring out how to actually use what you learn. Well, that's exactly what we're tackling today. We're diving deep into some powerful insights from the book Focus, the hidden driver of excellence. In this book, it's not just about, like, productivity hacks. It makes this argument that our ability to focus, it's the fundamental skill. It determines how well we perform, how we learn, how we interact, basically everything. We've gathered some really compelling research, some surprising facts from the book, and we're going to unpack them for you. Think of it as a shortcut to understanding attention from self-awareness, reading others, all the way to grasping these big, complex systems.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is how the author presents attention. It's not just one thing. It's more like a multifaceted skill set, something we can actually understand and, more importantly, something we can get better at. We'll explore how these different kinds of focus, how they add up to excellence, both for us as individuals and, working together.
Okay, let's dig into that. The book kicks off with this paradox. In a world super rich with information, we're somehow facing a poverty of attention, just bombarded all the time.
Exactly. And you have to ask, what's the real cost? What are the consequences of this attention decline? The book gives some pretty stark examples, like an 8th grade teacher, she saw her students really struggling with classic literature, like Edith Hamilton's mythology, finding the sentences too complicated, they couldn't even really get through a page, or an advertising exec in Mexico. He noticed video presentations had to shrink, like from 5 minutes down to maybe 90 seconds, because if you don't grab people immediately, they're gone, checking messages. And it gets more serious. You have lawyers taking medication, things for ADHD or even narcolepsy just to read contracts. It shows how these drugs have become almost, routine performance enhancers for focus.
So this isn't just about struggling with, like, a dense book. It affects our basic ability to function, to do things.
Precisely. The challenge goes right to our core mental operations. Attention is described as this supple tool. It's embedded in comprehension, memory, learning, sensing our own feelings, reading others' emotions, interacting smoothly. So when that faculty is kind of stunted, performance just drops across the board.
And what about multitasking?
Yeah.
We all kind of think we're good at it, right? Juggling emails, calls, projects. But the book pushes back on that idea, doesn't it? What does the science say? Are we really effective multitaskers?
Yeah, the book is pretty clear on this. Cognitive science tells us multitasking is, largely a fiction. We don't actually split our attention. What we do is switch back and forth really, really rapidly. And this constant switching, it just saps our ability to fully concentrate. As some researchers at Carnegie Mellon put it, the most precious resource in a computer system is no longer its processor, memory, disk, or network, but rather human attention. So the fix we need isn't really technological, it's cognitive. Our attention truly is our most valuable and, increasingly scarce resource.
So, okay, if focused attention is so critical, so scarce, is it always the best thing? This is where it gets really interesting for me. The book talks about the fruitfulness of the mind's tendency to drift. Sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But while mind wandering can definitely hurt your immediate task performance, studies show a reader's mind might wander 20, even 40% of the time, and comprehension suffers. But it also serves these really valuable functions.
So a wandering mind isn't just a bug. It's not just a distraction we need to fight off.
Exactly. Brain research actually suggests mind wandering helps us navigate our inner world. Our minds often drift towards our current personal concerns, maybe unresolved stuff. It's almost like it's operating in the service of solving problems that matter to us. It's not just random noise. Often it's drifting towards something meaningful.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about creativity? How does letting the mind wander play into innovation?
Yeah. A mind that's allowed to drift, that's often where the creative sparks fly. Take Mark Benioff, the Salesforce CEO. He took a month off, went to Hawaii, just relaxed. And in that sort of open space, that unfocused time, bam, he had the insight about cloud computing that led to Salesforce. The book even mentions studies involving people with ADD. They might zone out during certain tasks, right? But on creative challenges, like finding new uses for a brick, they actually performed better. People whose minds had wandered came up with something like 40% more original answers. It suggests that this kind of open awareness might be really good for creative work.
40% more. Wow.
Yeah. The brain often settles into this relaxed, open, focused state they called an alpha rhythm right before an insight hits. This sort of daydreamy reverie, it allows for these unexpected connections, novel combinations. You even see it in rappers when they're freestyling. Brain scans show heightened activity in those mind-wandering circuits. It lets them make those fresh aha connections on the fly.
That's fascinating. And it reminds me of that story about the discovery of cosmic background radiation. Penzias and Wilson, they initially just thought it was noise,
Right.
meaningless static, an insight emerging from the periphery.
Precisely. A perfect example. And this connects to another concept in the book, The Creative Cocoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's about setting aside protected time, having clear goals, sure, but also having freedom in how you get there. That freedom fosters those small, gradual insights that build up to breakthroughs.
Okay, so our minds can do both. Sharp focus and this beneficial wandering. How do we find the balance? William James, the founder of American psychology, he said something like, the faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention is the very root of judgment, character, and will. That sounds like it points us inward towards self-awareness.
It really does. Which brings us to inner focus, or self-awareness. The book talks about the insula. It's a brain region that acts like our inner rudder. It maps our body's internal state. It's tuned into how we're feeling, like our ability to literally sense our own heartbeat. That's a standard measure of self-awareness. But what's really striking is how much we don't see about ourselves. There's this example of a tech executive described as a huge bully, but with zero self-awareness, always shifting blame, getting angry when confronted, because he genuinely didn't perceive his own behavior that way.
So we kind of need external mirrors to really see ourselves accurately.
Absolutely. Things like 360-degree evaluations, where your own rating is compared with anonymous feedback from colleagues, they can be incredibly powerful. It reminds me of that Robert Burns line, oh, that the gods the gift would give us to see ourselves as others see us. Captures it perfectly. And the philosopher George Santayana talked about the looking glass self, how what others think of us deeply influences how we see ourselves. True self-awareness isn't just navel-gazing, it's partly a social process.
That connects directly to groupthink, doesn't it? Which the book mentions. These collective blind spots, like that financial exec calling buyers of subprime derivatives idiots, just totally missing the bigger picture and the warnings.
Yes, exactly. Or Kahneman's finding about investment advisors basically rewarding luck as if it were skill. And the firm just chose to ignore those uncomfortable facts, swept it under the rug. To counter this, the book really pushes for bringing in diverse perspectives. Like, there's a story of a cloud computing company that built a trust cloud to be totally transparent about server problems. That was a completely foreign idea to executives used to keeping things secret. But as Justice Frankfurter said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Transparency and different viewpoints break down those blind spots.
Right. So, beyond self-awareness, the book gets into self-control. How early does that skill start developing?
Oh, remarkably early. By age 3, toddlers are showing what's called effortful control. They're making that conscious choice to say no to an immediate temptation, like waiting for a treat. Even Sesame Street teaches it. Remember the Cookie Connoisseur Club? Cookie Monster learning to savor, not just inhale the cookie. And of course, the classic marshmallow test comes up. The kids who could wait longer often used a kind of mental trick, like imagining the marshmallow wasn't real, just a picture in a frame. That reframing helped them resist for much longer.
That's a neat trick. The book also gives a really striking, almost intense example of reframing for self-control. Tell us about the monk's story.
Yes. It's quite memorable. A monk sees a beautiful woman running past, pursued by her jealous husband. To maintain his own composure and, well, arguably to help her, when the husband asks if he saw her, the monk describes her as a bag of bones. It illustrates the power of reframing, but also maybe the downside of living entirely bottom up, just automatically reacting based on ingrained patterns, instead of seeing the moment, the person, as they actually are. Because overloading our attention, it shrinks our mental control. It leads to mindless choices like grabbing the chips when you're stressed, even if you want to eat healthy.
Okay, so we've looked inward. Now, moving outward. The book talks a lot about how we read others. Empathy, social sensitivity.
Yes, and empathy is presented as this really complex but vital skill. There's work by Justine Cassell on nonverbal cues. Fascinating stuff. It shows how even just the timing of a gesture, like a head nod, can completely flip the emotional meaning of what's being said. Turn a positive statement into sarcasm, for instance. These little meta-messages, they often fly by in microseconds, but they have huge impacts on relationships. Our gut picks them up, even if our conscious mind misses them. Marital researchers can actually predict divorce with pretty high accuracy just by watching for fleeting facial expressions like contempt or disgust during arguments.
Hmm. And what about people who can read emotions but don't seem to feel them? Like sociopaths.
Exactly. That's a key distinction the book makes. Sociopaths often show brain activity in their frontal areas, the thinking, language parts when they process emotions. Not so much in the limbic centers, which are more involved in direct feeling, so they kind of tell themselves about emotions. It's a cognitive understanding, a top-down process without the usual bottom-up gut reaction. And that cognitive empathy, unfortunately, allows them to manipulate people very effectively. They can spot vulnerabilities.
And the book throws in another factor here, power. It suggests power can actually make us less focused on others.
Yeah, it raises that difficult question. Does wealth or power make us less empathetic? There's research by Dr. Keltner looking at college students. He found wealthier students tended to show fewer nonverbal signs of engagement, like less eye contact, fewer nods, and more signs of disinterest, like checking the time, fidgeting. Conversely, students with fewer resources were often more attentive, more tuned in to others because, good relationships are crucial for their stability, and this difference can leave people feeling completely unseen, unheard, unfelt. Like that story of Miguel the laborer.
Right. So inner focus, other focus, and then there's this third dimension, outer focus, seeing the bigger picture, systems thinking. The story of Dr. Larry Brilliant is amazing, using coin patterns to track ancient trade routes and then applying that kind of systems awareness to huge global health challenges, like smallpox.
It's a fantastic example, and it highlights how often we suffer from systems blindness. We don't see the connections. And this illusion of explanatory depth, we think we understand how things work much better than we actually do. John Sterman, one of the founders of systems dynamics, he says something like, there are no side effects, just effects. Meaning, what we call side effects are usually just consequences of the system that our mental model failed to include. Like, calling electric cars zero emission without considering the emissions from generating the electricity, maybe from coal, or manufacturing the batteries and panels.
That's a really crucial point, especially for big, slow-moving problems like climate change.
Absolutely. These distant threats, as the book calls them, it's a heavy lift to get people mobilized about an odorless, tasteless, invisible gas like CO2. There's no immediate bottom-up message, no alarm bell screaming danger right here, right now.
So how can we get better at this? How do we cultivate systems literacy?
Well, the book suggests a few things. Tools like handprinter.org are interesting. They shift the focus. Instead of just dwelling on our negative eco-footprint, Handprinter encourages highlighting positive actions, our handprints, like insulating your water heater, which reduces energy use. This positive framing seems to boost engagement and make action feel more worthwhile. And then there are games. Things like SimCity. They can actually teach systems literacy pretty effectively, letting you play with complex systems, experiment, develop an intuitive feel for how things interact, the underlying rules. Peter Senge even calls kids natural systems thinkers. This kind of thinking, this ability to see connections, it should be a standard part of education, like Polynesian wayfinding, navigating vast oceans just by reading subtle cues in the waves, the stars, the wind. That's systems thinking in action.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. We need sharp focus, managed mind wandering, self-awareness, empathy, systems thinking. How do we actually develop these skills? What's the practical advice?
The core idea the book emphasizes is smart practice. It really pushes back against that simplified 10,000 hours myth. It's not just about putting in the time, it's about the quality of that time. It requires what's called deliberate practice. That means having clear goals, getting immediate feedback, ideally from an expert, and maintaining intense top-down focus, just daydreaming while you practice. That defeats the purpose. Your brain isn't actually rewiring the relevant circuits if your focus is elsewhere. So smart practice is about focus, deliberate engagement, using techniques that help our brains learn efficiently.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? Give us an example.
Memory training is a great one. Think about the Dalai Lama's interpreter, Jimba. He can interpret these long, complex 15-minute passages entirely from memory. How? Through chunking. It's a smart practice technique. Experts learn to store huge amounts of information as familiar patterns or chunks in their area of expertise, like a doctor recognizing maybe 50,000 different symptom patterns or chunks. And meditation, of course, is presented as a kind of mental gym specifically for attention. The basic instruction is incredibly simple. Notice when your mind has wandered and gently, without judgment, bring it back to your point of focus, like your breath. Every time you do that, it's like one rep, strengthening that mental muscle of attention. Experienced meditators actually get faster at noticing and disengaging from distractions.
And you mentioned positivity earlier. How does that fit into sustaining this kind of practice?
Yes. Richard Davidson's work at Wisconsin is key here. He found that a positive, energized mood activates the brain's left prefrontal cortex. This area helps us sustain positive feelings, stay optimistic, and persist towards our goals even when things get tough. There's even this concept called the Losada effect, or ratio, suggesting that for teams or even individuals to really thrive, positive interactions or emotions need to outweigh negative ones by about 3 to 1. That positive outlook helps keep the effort feeling worthwhile, keeps the joy in it.
We talked about games for systems thinking. Can they train attention directly too?
They definitely can, if they're designed well. Michael Posner's group did this study with preschoolers. They played a simple joystick game for just 5 days, and researchers saw shifts in their brain circuitry for executive attention, moving towards adult patterns. Good training games offer clear goals, increasing difficulty, they adapt to you, give instant feedback, and make you practice the skill in varied ways. But the design is critical. Some games, the book warns, can unintentionally encourage things like hostile attribution bias, seeing threats where there are none, or maybe lessen concern for others, so caution is needed there.
It really sounds like schools are starting to catch on and apply these ideas, which is great to hear.
Absolutely. There's a school in Spanish Harlem, PS 112, facing lots of challenges. They use breathing buddies. Little kids lie down with a stuffed animal on their belly and watch it rise and fall as they do deep breathing. It's part of an inner resilience program, helping kids learn to self-regulate, calm down, focus better. And it works. They see improved attention, less aggression. There's also the stoplight exercise. Red means stop, yellow, slow down and think, green, go ahead. Developed by Roger Weisberg. It teaches impulse control. A big analysis of programs like this found they boosted academic test scores by an average of 11%. And mindfulness practices teaching kids and adults to observe their experience moment to moment without judgment. That strengthens focus, executive control, working memory. It can even help break cycles of anxious thoughts. We're seeing it in workplaces too, like Google's Search Inside Yourself program, showing real boosts in self-awareness and empathy among employees.
So bringing this all together, especially for people in leadership roles, the book talks about a leader's triple focus. What does that entail?
Right. It's about constantly balancing those 3 streams of attention we've discussed. Inner focus, self-awareness, knowing your values. Other focus, empathy, reading the room. And outer focus, understanding the larger system, strategy. A weakness in any one of those can really throw a leader off balance. The book gives the example of Steve Tuttleman, a successful leader who consciously combines scanning lots of external information with tuning into his own gut reactions, his intuition built from experience.
And there's that great contrast between two leaders. One whose vision was just being better than our competition, kind of flat, and another who could speak genuinely from the heart because he was deeply connected to his own values, his inner focus.
Exactly. That highlights how inspiring leadership really requires tuning into both your own inner emotional reality and the reality of the people you're trying to inspire. It's core emotional intelligence, poor listening. It's practically epidemic. But attentive listening yields huge returns, like that CEO who resolved a tense land dispute just by sitting quietly and letting someone vent their complaints for 15 minutes straight. Only then could he propose a solution that landed.
And the cost of lacking one of these focuses can be immense. Tony Hayward during the BP oil spill comes to mind, saying, "I'd like my life back." Just completely missing the mark on empathy, on managing his impact, on seeing the bigger system failure.
A painful example, yes. And the neuroscience is interesting here, too. The brain networks for intense goal focus and for social scanning, for reading others, they can actually inhibit each other. So the most effective leaders, the book suggests, learn to cycle back and forth between these within seconds. It's a constant rapid switching. This also relates to what the book calls aperture, the ability to zoom in tightly on one person's feelings and then zoom out to grasp the collective mood of a team or market. Getting that right significantly impacts things like customer service, absenteeism, overall performance. And then there's the Larry Summers paradox. Brilliant systems thinker, no doubt, but seen as lacking in empathy and sensitivity to social context, which ultimately cause problems. A truly well-focused leader needs all 3.
So thinking long-term, what does this mean for making decisions that really shape the future?
It really underscores the need for leaders to have a long horizon. Alvin Weinberg, back in the early days of nuclear power, he urged the industry to think about solutions for radioactive waste that would last for centuries or millennia, way beyond next quarter's profits. Politicians, on the other hand, often get stuck in short-term election cycles. They might ignore what needs doing now to protect future generations, especially with those distant threats like climate change. Ultimately, the argument is to tackle the massive interconnected challenges we face, ecological crises, complex global organizations' attention needs to be widely distributed. One person, one leader can only see so much, but a swarm, a collective network of focused individuals, grasps much more.
Wow, okay, that's been an incredible journey into the power of focus, really unpacking what it means, from the basic mechanics of attention to using mind-wandering for creativity, sharpening self-awareness, self-control, reading others deeply, and finally grasping these big, complex systems. It really does feel like these interconnected skills are the hidden drivers of excellence.
Absolutely. I think this deep dive really shows that excellence isn't just about innate talent or just grinding harder. It's about consciously, deliberately cultivating and balancing these different kinds of attention. And the really hopeful message is that these are skills. They can be trained through things like meditation, through well-designed games, just through making conscious choices about how we engage day to day.
So as you, our listeners, go about your day, probably facing that constant barrage of distractions, those complex challenges, maybe take a moment. Remember these insights. If our attention really is our most precious resource, maybe the most vital question is, how will you choose to invest yours? How will you strategically focus to drive your own excellence and maybe contribute to a more aware, more empathetic world? Thank you so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and yeah, keep focusing on what truly matters.